Senators are going head-to-head this morning over America's crushing debt. Democrats are reportedly willing to cut tens of billions of dollars from Medicare and Medicaid, but they want something in return. With us now, Republican Senator Rob Portman of Ohio. He's a member of the Senate Budget Committee. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, Allison. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, so there is news this morning. Reportedly, the White House has agreed to cut tens of billions of dollars from Medicare and Medicaid, but there's a catch. They want Republicans to agree to some tax hikes. Will Republicans agree to that?
Well, what makes sense is to be sure we're not hurting this weak economic recovery more by raising taxes. So I don't think we should be raising taxes. We should be looking at deductions and credits and exclusions that don't make sense. We should be reforming taxes, and that could be part of this agreement. So I would hope we would move toward smart tax reform to make the economy work better, which is ultimately how to get out of the problem we're in. One, to restrain spending, but two, we've got to grow this economy.
But look, obviously you're at an impasse. I mean, we understand that there's a philosophical difference between Republicans and Democrats, but there's an impasse. And in fact, we had a little bit of news from our own Stu Varney this morning that maybe Senator John Cornyn, among others, had agreed to some sort of tax hike or tax loophole closing. Do you know if that's on the table?
Well, again, some of the loophole closing that's being talked about ought to happen in the context of tax reform. It's time for us to take our inefficient tax code that does not encourage investment or innovation, that makes us less competitive globally, and to bring it up to date. And by doing that, we would be closing a lot of loopholes. We'd also be generating more economic activity and therefore more revenues, but not by raising taxes on this weak economy. We've got 9.1% unemployment already.
Yeah.
The economic data don't look good, so it's not time to raise taxes, and I think the administration understands that.
Look, in addition to tax reform, which I think everybody thinks is a good idea, the general consensus is that you have to tackle entitlement spending, that unless you tackle the Social Security, the Medicare, the Medicaid, you're really just trimming around the edges. Is there going to be some sort of agreement on cutting those entitlements or changing them or reforming them somehow?
Well, there has to be, because those programs, as important as they are not sustainable in their current form. And again, the President's Fiscal Commission laid this out very clearly late last year. The President chose not to accept those recommendations, but I don't think anybody rejects the notion that you have to deal with these important programs if you're going to get the deficit and debt under control. They're the biggest part of the budget now. When you look at interest on the debt and the entitlement programs, it's more than half of the budget. And it's also the fastest growing part of the budget. So it is critical that we reform and improve these programs to make sure they're there. Otherwise, they're not going to be there for future generations. And it has to be part of this agreement if it's a meaningful and credible agreement.
Senator Cornyn yesterday on on Fox News Sunday actually talked about a mini deal that may exist, which might delay or postpone making major changes or budget cuts until after the 2012 elections. Is there a mini deal on the table?
I think it is on the table. I think it would be unfortunate because we'd be putting off the tough decisions. But we need to be sure that we do come together as Republicans and Democrats and solve this problem before we get into the post-debt limit period. It would be bad for the economy, in my view. It would also show the markets and others that Congress and the President simply can't get their act together. We need to get our act together to help encourage investment, encourage jobs. So we need to do something. And if all we can do is put together what's called a mini deal, which would be, I hope, about $1 trillion at least, to kick it into sometime next year, that's better than nothing.
Yeah.
But far better would be to actually deal with the underlying problem. It's a little like the government is maxed out on its credit card, Allison. And now we're saying, gee, what should we do about that? Well, just like in an American household, you do something about it by dealing with the spending.
Absolutely.
That's the problem.
Well,
it's not the tax issue, it's the spending issue.
All Americans can understand that analogy. Senator Rob Portman, thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks, Allison. Thanks for having me on.